I don't remember even singing. Now, I was so excited that I don't remember singing. But I remember patting my foot. Isn't that weird?
She was country music's steel backbone, the coal miner's daughter who transformed her suffering into poetry, her roots into royalty, and her voice into a revolution. Loretta Lynn did not merely sing about everyday existence, she lived it. For decades, she represented working-class women, proud Southern tenacity, and the raw honesty that country music was once known for. From the Opry stage to the White House, from controversy to critical acclaim, Loretta never faltered. She defied societal expectations and wrote songs that no woman before her had attempted. But, in the silent years preceding her death in 2022, something had changed behind the scenes. The lady who once ruled Nashville was starting to feel like a stranger in it. Loretta, according to those closest to her, longtime collaborators, family members, and trusted friends, had become disillusioned with the institution she had helped construct. The Grand Ole Opry, her hallowed stage, no longer resembled or sounded like the place she remembered. Behind closed doors, she began to voice great concern about how the modern country had become. They believed that she said it out of sadness, not hatred or resentment, because it wasn't just an issue of shifting preferences, it was personal. According to sources, Loretta mentioned 5 stars in private chats, 5 artists who, to her, represented the loss of something important. These were hardly casual criticisms. These were emotional reckonings, subtle confessions of pain from a lady who had dedicated her life to a genre that was starting to move on without her. Some of the names may not shock you. Others may feel surprised. However, when taken together, they depict a traditionalist who has been left behind by the industry she once defined. Understanding Loretta's unhappiness requires an understanding of what country music meant to her. It didn't include glitter or pageantry. It wasn't chart placements or stadium fireworks. It was kitchen table truth, backroad heartbreak, and songs written by folks who had lived the experiences they sang about. Loretta apparently watched with disappointment as the genre moved toward Polish and mainstream appeal. Not because she wanted the attention, but because she was concerned about what would happen if tradition was replaced by fashion. The following is not tabloid gossip. It's the story of a legend who spent her last years dealing with a cultural upheaval that left her heart heavy, not angry, but betrayed. And not by strangers, but by the rising stars of her own culture. For Loretta Lynn, the Grand Ole Opry was more than just a venue. It was a second home. When she first took the stage in the early 1960s, she wasn't just a teenage vocalist with a dream. She was a coal miner's daughter who elevated the experiences of working-class women to the forefront of country music, and the Opry treated her like family. The friendship grew stronger over time. The stage witnessed her victories and losses, her development as a lyricist, and her transition into a national icon. But in the latter decade of her life, that familiar stage began to feel strange. Something was changing, not just in the music, but also in the atmosphere of the area. Loretta, according to close confidants, was growing increasingly concerned about the state of the Opry. To her, it had always represented raw ability and lived experience, a place where you earned your status by grit rather than glamour. However, as corporate sponsorships increased, the lights brightened, and the performances became more planned, she reportedly felt an increasing detachment. In her opinion, the Opry was no longer about honky-tonk and holler vocals. It was about the image, about television ratings, about branding. She wasn't the only legend who felt this way, but few dared to express it openly. Loretta, who was never one to mince words in her songs, kept much of her disappointment hidden. Those who saw her at Hurricane Mills in her latter years remember her staring at the screen during Opry broadcasts in calm awe. Where were the women with calloused hands and tough stories? Where were the outlaws who had not polished their edges for prime time? She'd seen the shifts in stages before, but this time felt different. It felt permanent. She purportedly cited the absence of older musicians on broadcast specials as evidence of the new order. It wasn't simply who performed, it was also about who wasn't invited. Friends say she believed the exclusion of legends like herself, Dolly Parton and Reba McEntire from important broadcast moments was more than an oversight. It was erased, a creeping rewrite of what the country once stood for. By the time Loretta made her final Opry visits, the contrast was unmistakable. The stage, which had previously celebrated grit and storytelling, now gleamed with a pop brilliance. Even while she smiled for the cameras, those close to her said sadness lingered behind her eyes. The Opry had not only changed, her heart had moved on. Carrie Underwood was often regarded as a force. From her debut on national television to her quick rise on country radio, she appeared bound for greatness. Her voice was unmistakable, her stage presence polished, and her image meticulously cultivated. However, Loretta Lynn saw perfection as the source of her problems. While Loretta never publicly condemned Carrie, people close to her say she had strong worries about what the young star represented and what her spectacular rise meant for the changing face of country music. Many saw Carrie as the Opry's new face. She was gorgeous, eloquent, and had crossover appeal, which drew new people into the genre. However, Loretta apparently represented a change away from the raw, emotional sincerity that distinguished the country's foundations. There was nothing sloppy about Carrie. There are no rough edges. There is no evidence of the struggle that Loretta's generation used to speak about. That disconnect made Loretta uneasy. Loretta purportedly spoke in private how the Opry was focusing on performers who felt too Hollywood, too made for TV. While she valued talent, she also believed that authentic country music could not be manufactured. It had to be lived. Carrie, in her opinion, was more pop than country. Loretta perceived the presence of such artists on the Opry stage as a sign that the organization had switched from honoring heritage to pursuing mainstream acclaim. Her suffering was also symbolic. Carrie was not just successful, she was constantly hailed by the industry as the next queen of the country. That designation, while complimentary to any musician, held significance in Loretta's culture. It wasn't something you achieved through album sales or accolades. It was something you earned after years of working hard, composing from the heart, and singing through heartache. While Loretta never questioned Carrie's singing ability, she did believe the business had rushed to crown someone who had not lived the life that country music was supposed to reflect. To clarify, this was not about jealousy. Loretta had never been one to compete with younger artists or cling to her prior successes. What worried her, according to acquaintances, was Carrie's elevation, which represented a genre drifting away from the dirt roads and dive bars, as well as the suffering that served as its foundation. Loretta recognized the Opry's new orientation as Carrie rose to prominence, sparkling, perfect, and just a touch too pure. Loretta Lynn previously considered Garth Brooks to be a touring partner and an admirable figure. She talked fondly of his vigor and respect for tradition at the beginning, and the two had a strong bond with the ideals that underpin country music. But as Garth's career soared to arena-filling acclaim, something changed. According to close friends, Loretta began to see Garth not only as a superstar, but as a symbol of the very changes she feared were sweeping the genre. It was not about talent. Loretta never questioned Garth's capabilities or work ethic. It was about the direction his career took and what it meant. Garth transformed country music as a worldwide entertainment commodity through big stage theatrics, pop-leaning tunes, and an emphasis on showmanship. Loretta, who grew up singing about difficult truths on small stages, apparently perceived this move as a lack of soul. She supposedly told a friend that the lights got so bright they drowned out the stories. This wasn't just a poetic statement. It was her way of expressing that spectacle had begun to supplant authenticity. While she has never publicly attacked Garth, insiders believe her silence speaks volumes. The man who once stood for substance had joined a machine that valued scale over storytelling. There were no disagreements between them. There's no feud, just a quiet distance. Loretta didn't despise Garth personally, but she lamented what his professional path represented. A fork in the road where country music veered toward commercial success and away from its raw, dusty roots. In her opinion, it was not about celebrity, but about forgetting where you came from. That, to her, was the most profound type of betrayal. Among the names Loretta Lynn allegedly stated in private, none seemed to have the same sting as Travis Tritt. Their kinship was strong, two traditionalists who previously stood shoulder to side, fighting for the soul of country music. Loretta loved Travis's tenacity, his outlaw image, and the way he stuck to old-school ideals, even as the industry changed around him. But in her later years, her respect turned to sadness as she saw him siding with the very forces they had fought against. According to close acquaintances, the schism began when Travis backed crucial Opry and CMA choices that pushed older legends further to the shadows. One event in particular stuck out: a large broadcast country music program that omitted legends such as Loretta, George Jones, and even Reba. Loretta apparently considered Travis's participation in the event as a betrayal, demonstrating that he had linked himself with the corporate interests they used to condemn. She didn't discuss it openly. That was not her way. However, some who were present at Hurricane Mills recall Loretta expressing confusion and hurt. She couldn't comprehend how someone who previously cherished heritage so much could suddenly support policies that obliterated it. It was not about ego, it was about principles, and seeing Travis on those stages, smiling alongside CEOs and pushing a cleaner, more marketable version of country music, hit harder than most expected. What hurt the most was Travis's apparent inability to remember the voices that created him. Loretta never attempted to control the genre's progress, but she demanded allegiance to those who laid its groundwork. Travis had not simply moved on, according to her. He had abandoned tradition, and in doing so, had abandoned her as well. Loretta Lynn was no stranger to change. She has witnessed country music grow over decades of political changes, pop crossovers, and commercial trends. But one criticism in particular hit a nerve in her later years, and it came from Blake Shelton, a man long seen as the genre's new backbone. In a 2013 interview, Blake famously stated that country music has to evolve or die. He referred to traditionalists who opposed the shift as old farts and jackasses. The remark enraged fans of vintage country, but it struck Loretta especially hard. Those close to her say she never forgot the statement. Loretta was apparently overheard at her Hurricane Mills ranch explaining that adapting does not imply forsaking one's roots. She believed that advancement did not have to mean giving up one's identity. To her, country music was already diverse and evolving, but it had always maintained its emotional honesty. Blake's statements felt dismissive of that tradition, a public encouragement of silencing the very voices who paved the road. Despite the outcry, Blake defended the genre's survival in subsequent interviews, presenting it as a business move. Loretta, who had spent her life singing about genuine anguish and basic truths, apparently felt that this worldview prioritized business over people. It wasn't about disliking younger performers. It was about witnessing the heart of country music being altered by market strategy. She never approached Blake directly. That was not her style, but disappointment lingered. It wasn't just one remark. It was indicative of a larger cultural shift she couldn't ignore. Yes, she saw country music evolving, but not necessarily in a way that acknowledged its soul. Kelsea Ballerini was possibly the most unexpected name mentioned in Loretta Lynn's final chats concerning the shifting face of country music. Kelsea, unlike others, had never publicly disagreed with Loretta. She had even paid honor to the luminaries that came before her and praised the ladies who paved the way. But, according to close insiders, Loretta's problem was not personal, it was symbolic. She apparently saw Kelsea as the industry's chosen successor to the Queen of Country throne, a title Loretta did not think should be given so readily. Friends recall Loretta quietly stating that declaring someone the next queen after only a few radio singles was like serving microwave popcorn and calling it a steak dinner. For her, it wasn't about the individual, it was about the message being delivered. Loretta believed that country music royalty should be earned over time, not rushed by label backing and social media presence. She watched as younger musicians rose to prominence, while more established voices faded from award events, radio, and television appearances. The problem, in Loretta's opinion, was not Kelsea, but the mechanism that crowned artists before they had a chance to struggle, fall, or evolve. She never openly chastised Kelsey or questioned her talent, but the industry's eagerness to announce the new face of country music while shoving the old ones to the sidelines touched a nerve. It reminded her of how easily history could be altered and how vulnerable legacy becomes in the hands of marketers. Her unease stemmed from a fear that the qualities she had built her career on, truth, suffering, and perseverance, would be replaced with polish and promotion, and for Loretta, that was the most devastating loss. Loretta Lynn spent more of her final years at Hurricane Mills than she did on stage. The ranch, once teeming with tour buses, admirers, and reporters, became her peaceful haven. There, surrounded by the land she adored, she reflected on a life in country music, distinguished by grit, defiance, and stories that shaped the industry. Those close to her claim she hid a deep sadness beneath her bright smile and courteous public appearance. Not for herself, but for the genre she had dedicated her all to. Friends who visited her during those final months described her flicking through old photo albums and watching television, silently soaking in the shift that had occurred. She witnessed tributes that omitted her name and specials that glorified new legends while ignoring those who shaped the stage. She did not express her fury, but there was an undeniable ache when she asked basic questions like, "When did we stop remembering?" Loretta did not expect country music to remain frozen in time. She had always welcomed fresh voices and praised rising performers who remembered the past. What wounded her was the sense that history was being erased, not by the genre's foes, but by its own rising stars and decision-makers. The Opry, once the heart of her quest, no longer resonated in the same way. Following her death, we are left with more than simple songs. We are left with a warning that even icons can be lost as tradition is replaced by trend and truth is supplanted by spectacle. Loretta's voice may be gone, but her tale lives on, and it serves as a reminder to never let our country's roots fade into obscurity. If you believe that country music legends should be honored, please share this story, because a genuine country remembers.